7 years of marriage, 2 beautiful children, and a life we worked so hard to build. Nothing was perfect. Until one day, Susie started coming home late. At first, harmless, just a new friend at work. But her behavior changed, and I would uncover a truth that shatters our perfect world. Was love strong enough to stand against betrayal and hidden desires? Life was a dream 7 years ago. Susie and I built our relationship on laughter, shared ambitions, and deep trust. We met at college. There was just something about her warm and affectionate personality that I just simply could not resist. That's the kind of person that will make a stranger smile when they pass by, and it hooked me from day one. Our wedding day was the culmination of our love story, and over the years we were blessed with 2 beautiful children. But with parenthood came new challenges, but they were faced as a couple together, growing closer with every milestone. My family meant everything to me, and I thought Susie felt that way too. Our life wasn't fancy, but it was full of love. Between school runs and weekend outings and cozy nights at home, I didn't think much of what may be lying beneath the surface. I didn't see cracks form, and perhaps I didn't want to. Love had blinded me, or maybe just made me complacent. It all started changing when Susie began a new job. One evening, she came home bubbling over with stories of her colleagues, especially Anne. "She's so funny and smart," Susie said, and her eyes lit up in a way I hadn't seen in a while. I was glad for her. A good friend at work seemed like a blessing. Little did I know, this friendship would soon alter the course of our lives forever. Nothing really was wrong with the Susie-Anne relationship at first. They sometimes met to discuss their day over coffee or some glasses of wine. Nothing would irritate me then, since there was a need to make good acquaintances outside our circle at the end of hectic workdays. But weeks turned into months, and these dinner dates became more frequent. "It's just dinner," she'd say, dismissing my apprehensions when I asked her why she came back so late. Her answers were plausible enough, but the seed was planted in my mind, and I never looked away. Change came not just in her routine, but in her attitude as well. She became withdrawn and preoccupied, spending much of her time on the phone, not really attending to our family life. My kids did not miss it. The oldest asked one night, "Why is Mom always out?" That innocent question was a dagger to the heart, reflecting the growing distance I couldn't ignore. Susie's behavior became impossible to rationalize. No more impromptu family dinners, no more spontaneous movie nights, but instead I would find myself alone in the evenings, wondering why the woman I loved seemed so far away, even when she was just a room or sometimes a world away. Susie's vibrant energy around the house began to fade. She seemed preoccupied, as if her mind was elsewhere even when she was physically present. Our conversations became shorter, full of superficial updates rather than the deep, meaningful exchanges we used to share. I did not know how to bridge the gap that had formed between us. It was no longer about her mood, it became a behavior. She started becoming withdrawn, and especially with her phone. She took it with her even during events when she would have normally taken it off. She is also receiving text messages very late at night from no number. Whenever I brought it up, she will just shrug it and say, "It is just work stuff." I tried to reassure myself that this was just the passing phase, perhaps stress caused by her new job or the enthusiasm of a new friendship. Yet the signs were becoming too obvious. She changed her wardrobe. She began to dress up more often to attend casual outings with Anne. When I complimented her with hope to rekindle some spark, her replies felt dismissive. One night after the kids were asleep, I finally worked up the courage to bring it up. "Is everything all right between us?" I asked, trying to sound as steady as possible. Susie looked startled, almost as if she hadn't been expecting the question. "Of course," she said quickly. Too quickly. "Why would you even ask that?" Her response only made me feel more uncomfortable. Something was not right, and the gap between us was increasing day by day. We were chatting with our friend Emma over a cup of coffee a week later when she happened to bring it up. "So, Susie's been hanging out with Anne a lot these days," Emma said. "She seems to talk of nothing else, working on this huge project together." I hesitated, not knowing what to say. Not that I know if I stammered, my voice weakening. Emma's brow furrowed a little as she gave me a concerned look. "I mean, it's great that she's got a friend at work, but everything okay with you two?" She repeated a concern that had long been my secret worry. I wished to banish it from my mind and to think of Susie's errands as innoxious. Now that she brought up her worries, though, the denial seemed so much harder to accomplish. "All's right," I fibbed, feigning a grin. That night I kept replaying Emma's words in my mind. If even an outsider had this feeling that something wasn't right, then maybe it wasn't all in my head after all. I needed some answers, but I didn't know if I was prepared for what I would find. It finally came one evening after Susie had returned home well past midnight. The children were asleep, and I sat in the living room waiting. When she entered, perfume and laughter lingered in the air that filled her evening. "Where were you?" I inquired, trying to keep the even tone. "With Anne, like I told you," she said, looking away while taking off her coat. "It's always Anne," I said, my voice glazed with frustration. "You've been spending more time with her than your family. Would that not be a problem?" Susie froze, her back to me. For a moment the room was silent. Then she turned around, her expression hard. "I'm allowed to have friends, aren't I? Or is that not okay with you?" A very defensive diction really shocked me. "Of course you can have friends, Susie. But this isn't just friendship anymore, is it?" She blinked once but put herself together in the succeeding moment. "Stop being paranoid," she said, almost shouting her words. "Anne is a friend. Why can't you trust me?" Trust. The word had pierced me like a dagger. Had I lost it, or had she? We stood there, locked in an unspoken battle of suspicion and denial. That night I slept on the couch, haunted by the feeling that my marriage was slipping through my fingers. It had reached a point that I could no longer endure the tension at home. Suspicions reached breaking point. I could no longer ignore the nagging feeling that something was going on between Susie and Anne that she did not want to let out in the open. One evening, while she was taking a shower, I did something I never thought I would have to do: pick up her phone. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through her messages. At first, there was nothing alarming, just casual banter and work-related discussions. But then I found a separate thread between Susie and Anne, buried beneath others. Their tone in these messages was different, playful, intimate, and far too personal for a friendship. One of them impressed me last night was amazing. "Can't wait to see you again, sank my heart." What I first suspected had now, on the face of confirmation of my worst fears, now turned out to have had a physical dimension as well. I felt mixed emotions of anger and brokenness. I wanted to lash out at her immediately, but I needed some time to go through what I had just unearthed. That night, Susie slept soundly by my side while I sat on the bed staring up at the ceiling, fathoming the terrible fact that the woman I had loved had wronged me. The next day I couldn't hold it inside anymore. The kids being at school, I asked Susie to sit down and talk. My voice was calm, but the storm inside me was raging. "I need to know the truth about you and Anne," I said, my eyes holding hers. Susie looked surprised but said nothing to deny it. Rather, she breathed in a deep breath, almost as if she had been waiting for this moment. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she stammered, her voice shaking. "Anne and I, it just started as a close friendship. But somewhere along the way, it became more." Her confession sent a punch to my gut, and the question that I always dreaded shot out of my lips: "How far has it gone?" She said with tears in her eyes that it was an emotional and physical affair. "It wasn't about you," she said, as if that made it better. "Anne made me feel alive again, like I wasn't just a wife and mother, but someone who mattered in a different way." Her words were a knife twisting in my chest. Did our life together mean so little? I couldn't bring myself to speak. Susie broke down, apologizing repeatedly, but her tears did little to ease the pain. I got up and left the room, unable to look at her. I knew that day that our marriage was never going to be the same again. Now, whether it could survive or not was the only thing. It was one of the toughest times in my life after Susie confessed. I couldn't look directly at her. Everything about her made me recall anger, sadness, and betrayal all at once. Her apologies and promises to make things right were not enough to curb the skepticism that now accosted my mind by evaluating every moment over the last 7 years. We settled for civil for the sake of the kids, but the house was charged with tension. There was little more to it than short, tense exchanges in which we discussed just the bare essentials. I saw the regret in Susie's eyes, but nothing that would lift all the hurt she'd placed there. One evening when the children were asleep, she cautiously approached me. "I feel that we have to talk about what the future is going to hold for us," she said softly. I nodded, even though I wasn't sure if I was ready for the conversation. "Do you want to save this marriage?" I asked boldly. She answered cautiously. "I do, but I also think we need to be honest about what is missing. Maybe we should consider an open arrangement." Her words stunned me. An open arrangement. Was this her way of justifying her actions? I felt anger and suppressed it. "You are saying you want to stay married but also keep seeing Anne." Susie looked down, unable to meet my gaze. "I don't know," she said to herself. "I just feel like we need to explore what makes each of us happy." It left me reeling. For what she thought was a solution was for me another betrayal. Then I knew that the way forward would be far more complicated than I could have ever imagined. Susie's proposal was something that weighed heavy on my shoulders. An open relationship meant something that was way out of my league for everything I had thought of marriage. I consulted a counselor to get some perspective. "What do you want out of this?" the counselor asked during our session. That was the nub of it. I didn't know. I wanted to fight to make our marriage, and to what we had made better, but another part asked whether it was at all possible to rebuild that type of trust after such deep penetration and intrusion. Susie and I started therapy, having a moment where we opened up our frustrations to the fact that we both felt we got lost in our roles as wives and mothers. "It wasn't about losing love for you," she said, tears streaming. "I was losing me, and Anne gave me something I didn't know I needed." It was painful, honesty, but it helped me understand her side. Still, understanding did not mean forgiveness. Let her know that if we were going to move forward, Anne needed to be completely out of the picture. Susie agreed, but could see the reservation in her eyes. Knowing that trying to revive our marriage was a leap in the dark, much effort from both our parts. Deep inside, I was secretively fearing it may come too little, too late. Months passed, and life slowly began to be something else. Therapy had become part of our daily life as a couple as well as individually. Susie had cut off contact with Anne, but she never lost the scars of her infidelity. Trust has to be rebuilt every single day. I was constantly suspecting her of everything, and she, on the other hand, was overcompensating to win my trust. It was tiresome, but we decided to try. Our children were the glue that cemented us together in difficult times. Laughter reminded us of what was at risk the family we were seeking to preserve. Slowly, moments of warmth again crept into our lives, a shared smile, a heartfelt conversation, and nights spent reminiscing on better times. But our marriage was never like it was before. The romantic fantasy of our marriage was over, and something so fragile yet honest had emerged in its place. We had to realize that that love would never be the same again. Sitting one evening watching our kids play, I realized that while the past was something that could not be undone, the future remained unwritten. Whether or not we could ever actually move forward as a couple was still in question, but one thing was definitely clear: the journey taught me about resilience, communication, and self-worth. It didn't end on some fairy tale ending. It ended in teaching me a lesson on love and trust as part of contemporary marriage. Perhaps imperfection might be something that allows scope for another new beginning.